Hello and welcome. Let's get straight into it. A short technical note has been circulating in shipping and energy circles this week, the kind that never makes headlines but quietly moves budgets. It's about an ARC7 LNG tanker, ice class, built at Russia's Zvezda yard, reportedly delivered under the name Alexei Kosygin. And if you're sitting in Europe, especially here in the Baltics, you should care, because this is not a patriotic trophy story. It's a logistics story. It's a bottleneck story. This is arithmetic, not ideology. Europe does not buy gas. Europe buys a chain: liquefaction, ships, insurance, regasification, grids, and finally a molecule that makes it into your socket or your boiler. Break one link and the whole thing becomes expensive, unreliable, and politically loud. So what is the real point of an ARC7 LNG tanker? An ARC7 carrier is built to operate in real ice, not postcard ice. It's not a normal LNG carrier with a stronger hull. It's a different cost category, a different propulsion category, and a different risk profile. And the reason it matters is simple. Arctic LNG projects live or die by ship availability. You can have gas in the ground, you can have a liquefaction plant, you can have buyers. But if you don't have the right ships, you don't have exports. You have stranded production. Now, hold that thought. Let's unpack why LNG carriers are hard in the first place, and why ice-class LNG carriers are a headache squared. LNG is transported at around minus 162 degrees Celsius. That's not cold. That's your steel wants to behave differently cold. The ship's cargo tanks are basically a moving thermos the size of an apartment block. And the whole economic game is reducing boil-off, meaning how much LNG evaporates every day. Boil-off is lost money, lost cargo, and sometimes extra emissions, depending on how it's handled. Historically, a lot of LNG carriers used spherical tanks, the famous Moss type. Spheres you can spot from space. They're robust, but they waste volume, and they carry extra structure you don't get paid for. Typical boil-off on older designs could be in the ballpark of a few tenths of a percent per day, sometimes around 0.3 to 0.5%, depending on conditions and design. Then the world moved toward membrane tanks, where the tank conforms to the hull shape. Much better cargo volume, less dead space, less unnecessary mass. But the engineering is nastier. You're talking about thin metal membranes, insulation panels, secondary barriers, and layers of structure that must survive thermal cycling, vibration, sloshing, and the casual cruelty of the sea. On modern membrane systems, boil-off can be closer to roughly 0.1 to 0.15% per day. That difference sounds small until you multiply it by voyage duration, cargo value, and fleet scale. Small percentages are how big companies get rich and how governments get confused. Here's the part people miss. Membrane tanks are not installed like a refrigerator. They are built into the ship. You don't fabricate them somewhere else and drop them into a hold. You build them along with the hull with incredibly strict quality control. That means you need supply chains for specialized alloys, specialized insulation systems, specialized adhesives, specialized prefabricated panels, and trained labor that can repeat the process reliably. On the planet, the number of teams that can do this at scale is limited, and for years, a lot of that capability sat in South Korea, with heavy involvement from established licensors and system providers. That's why this first domestic ARC7 LNG tanker claim matters. Not because it changes the world tomorrow, but because it signals whether Russia can move from one ship delivered to a repeatable series, especially after 2022 disrupted licensing, equipment support, and international cooperation. Let's get concrete with a few dense points, without pretending we have classified shipyard spreadsheets. Data point 1. ARC7 ships are expensive. A conventional large LNG carrier is already a high-cost asset. Ice-class ARC7 carriers are often discussed as costing roughly double, sometimes more, because you're paying for hull reinforcement, winterization, propulsion, and redundancy. Data point 2. Propulsion is the trap. Ice-class LNG shipping is not just about thicker steel. It's about controllability in ice. Many ARC7 concepts rely on steerable electric pods, the kind of system where the propulsor rotates and gives you maneuverability that a standard shaft line struggles to match in ice conditions. High-power podded propulsion has historically been dominated by a few major suppliers. If that supply is disrupted, you either stockpiled, substituted, or re-engineered. All three options are slow and expensive. Data point 3. LNG is energy-intensive by nature. Turning gas into LNG costs energy. Depending on the process and conditions, you can think in rough ranges. Liquefaction might consume something like 10 to 15% of the gas energy content. Regasification and downstream handling adds more losses, often a few percent. LNG is flexibility, not efficiency. Pipelines are cheaper when politics allow them. LNG is what you do when reality says no pipeline. Data point 4. Boil-off still matters even with good tanks. If you ship for 2 weeks, a 0.1% per day boil-off is not nothing. It compounds. Not catastrophic, but not free. Data point 5. Europe, including Lithuania, is exposed to shipping constraints more than it likes to admit. The Klaipėda terminal can regasify LNG, but it cannot summon ships out of thin air. In tight markets, charter rates rise, delivery timing becomes a battlefield, and small regions feel it first. Let me zoom out for a second. Why is this about Europe at all if the ship is Russian and the Arctic is far away? Because LNG is a global pool. When one region loses flexibility, another region pays. If Arctic LNG volumes get delayed, rerouted, or constrained by ship availability, then buyers compete for alternative cargoes. Europe has been leaning heavily on LNG since pipeline flows became politically constrained. A big share of marginal LNG into Europe has been coming from the United States and other exporters. That works until Asian demand rises, shipping tightens, or insurance and risk premia spike. Now add China into the picture. China is building shipyards, building LNG carriers, building ports, and building its own energy system with a level of industrial coordination Europe can only write reports about. China's shipbuilding capacity and learning curve is not a rumor. It's visible in output. So when people ask, is China a competitor in advanced energy and shipping tech? The real answer is yes. But the competition is not a headline. The competition is manufacturing depth and repetition. The United States, meanwhile, is a different machine. It's strong in LNG exports, finance, and upstream production, and it has a lot of industrial capability. But it doesn't currently behave like a centralized shipbuilding mobilization economy. It buys, it sells, it sanctions, it arbitrages. It's very good at that. Building specialized ice-class LNG fleets at scale is a different type of effort. Europe is stuck in the middle, dependent on global LNG, constrained by internal politics, and running an energy system where reliability is increasingly treated as an optional feature, until it isn't. Now, back to the ship, because the ship is the point. If Russia can build ARC7 LNG carriers domestically, even slowly, it reduces one of the key choke points for Arctic LNG projects: fleet availability under external restrictions. If it cannot, then Arctic LNG becomes a story of delays, higher costs, and rerouting. Either way, Europe gets a signal. Your energy security is not only about prices and contracts. It's about physical assets that take years to build. There's also a deeper contradiction here, and it's the one people avoid because it sounds boring. The contradiction is, global energy trade depends on property rights, licensing regimes, classification, insurance, and trusted maintenance ecosystems. Sanctions and geopolitics punch holes in that ecosystem. Then everyone pretends the holes do not matter, until a project schedule slips by 18 months, and suddenly it matters a lot. So what are the symptoms you'll actually see? You'll see tighter LNG shipping availability in peak seasons. You'll see higher delivered costs, even if the commodity price looks stable. You'll see more transshipment strategies, more complex routing, more reflagging, more, it's not Russian gas, it's gas that got a new passport. You'll also see European industry continuing to face an uncomfortable question. Can you run a serious industrial economy on expensive, volatile energy and still compete? This is where the story gets uncomfortable for both sides. Russia's claim, if you strip the rhetoric, is, we want to move molecules and get paid, and we'll adapt the logistics to do it. Europe's current posture, again, stripped of rhetoric, often looks like, we want the molecules, but we also want a moral narrative that claims we don't. That's not stable. Something eventually gives. In practice, it's usually the consumer bill and the industrial base that gives first. Let's finish with 3 endgame scenarios, because that's what matters. Scenario 1, the series production scenario. This first ARC7 LNG tanker is not a one-off, and the domestic supply chain is good enough to repeat. Arctic LNG exports remain constrained, but functional. Cargoes find buyers through intermediaries, and Europe still competes in the global LNG pool, paying a risk premium in tight months. Scenario 2, the one ship doesn't make a fleet scenario. The ship is delivered, but propulsion, control systems, or quality repetition remain bottlenecks, so scaling is slow. Arctic LNG growth underperforms expectations. The global LNG market stays tight, and Europe keeps learning the same lesson every winter. Logistics beats speeches. Scenario 3, the regulatory squeeze scenario. Even if ships exist, insurance, classification, frictions, and geopolitical risk pricing push Arctic routes into a higher cost, higher complexity lane. Trade adapts through transshipment and rerouting, but the delivered cost rises, and Europe's competitiveness problem becomes structural, not cyclical. So when you hear ARC7 LNG tanker delivered, don't treat it like a flag-waving story. Treat it like a signal flare from the supply chain. The LNG market is not just molecules, it's ships, and ships are slow to build. Whoever controls the fleet controls the optionality. If you want, drop a comment. Do you think Europe is underpricing shipping risk or overreacting to it? If this analysis helps, subscribe for more. I appreciate your time. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a good day and good luck.